The first college football playoff poll will be released in less than a month, so let's go through some of the teams and see who has a realistic shot at making it into the college football playoffs this year. Now let's go through each conference one at a time, starting with the SEC. And I think there's realistically about 5.5 teams that could make it to the college football playoffs from the SEC. And we'll get to what that half means, but starting off, I think Ole Miss has a really good shot to make it. They have looked really good with Trinidad Chambliss, and really they've looked good in every one of their games except that game against Washington State where they did not look great, but I'm willing to give them the benefit of the doubt and say it was one bad game and not judge too harshly on that game. And Ole Miss is sitting at 6-0, but they do have some tough games coming up that they will have to play. They will go into Sanford Stadium to take on the Georgia Bulldogs. They'll go into Oklahoma to take on the Sooners. And John Mateer should be 100% healthy for that game against Ole Miss for Oklahoma. He didn't look 100% healthy against Texas, but by this point, he should be healthy. And those are really the two toughest games for this Rebel squad. I could see them winning out and being undefeated going into the conference championship game. And speaking of the conference championship game in the SEC, the Texas A&M Aggies look like they will not lose a game this year, and they will be undefeated going into the conference championship game. Now, just as good as Texas A&M has looked this year should be enough. But the Aggies have what is realistically one of the easiest schedules, if not the easiest schedule in the SEC. Sitting at 6-0 and well, the Aggies take on Arkansas on the road, LSU on the road, an LSU team that is very overrated and should not be ranked 10th. Then they go to Columbia to take on Mizzou, then finish with South Carolina, a non-conference game in Sanford, and then a rivalry game in Texas. Now, that Mizzou game will be the Aggies' toughest challenge of the year. Ahmed Hardy and Mizzou are looking really good in the SEC. But outside of that, they don't have too tough of a schedule. I mean, Arkansas should be a pretty easy win. I think they'll beat LSU pretty easily. South Carolina, and then this Texas team. It is on the road. It is a rivalry game, but this Texas team has not looked good. I'm calling it now after Week 7. A&M will be undefeated and in the conference championship game in the SEC. And then we have Alabama that could also make it to the playoffs from the SEC. They do have one non-conference loss against Florida State in Week 1, a game that they did not look great, but since that game, they have looked unstoppable. They beat Georgia on the road. They beat Mizzou on the road. They beat Vanderbilt at home. All three of those games, the Tide looked really good. Ty Simpson is playing very good football right now. But Alabama does have a little bit of a tough path to get there. They will host Tennessee in the third Saturday in October. They will host LSU, who I do think is overrated, but they will also host Oklahoma with a completely healthy John Mateer. And then they have to play Auburn in Jordan-Hare, and we've seen weird things happen in that game. We've seen that Auburn can hang with any team in the country. They played Georgia really tough. They played a really good Oklahoma team really tough. And in both of those games, not the best officiating, and all of it went against Auburn. I think Auburn is a good football team, and I think Auburn will give Alabama a run for their money. I don't know if the Tide can win out. And then we have Tennessee, and look, Tennessee is a very underranked team. Tennessee has one loss on the year, and that loss that they have is to a Georgia team by a missed field goal. If they don't miss the field goal, everybody in the country is talking about how great Tennessee is. But one missed field goal, and it almost feels like Tennessee has been written off. And looking at the Vols schedule, they don't have a terribly tough schedule either. Obviously having to face Alabama, and then they do host Oklahoma a few weeks later. But besides that, they don't have any tough games. They have Florida, and this Florida team hasn't looked very good. They get to host Vanderbilt, and I think that will be a pretty easy win for the Vols. So I see a very real possibility of Tennessee not losing a game, beating Bama, and then not losing a game in conference play, and having one loss against Georgia. And I wouldn't be surprised if one loss does get them into the conference championship game. If not, it will at least get them into the playoffs. And speaking of Georgia, Georgia has a good shot to make the playoffs as well. This Georgia team has looked really good, beating Tennessee, obviously, in a very close game that went into overtime, and then losing to Alabama, a team that has been Kirby Smart and Georgia as a whole's Achilles heel and their kryptonite, and a hump that they have not gotten over yet. But they have gotten over every other hump that has come their way. Now, Georgia would have to beat Ole Miss, who they do host, win against Mississippi State in Starkville. And this Mississippi State team is actually a pretty good football team. They're not quite at that top tier, but they can definitely give Georgia a run for their money. And then Texas, who again hasn't looked very good. So Georgia gets a fairly easy schedule. I don't think they'll lose another game on the year. maybe to Ole Miss. I'm not saying they're going to go undefeated, but I wouldn't be surprised if they did beat Ole Miss. This Ole Miss team is looking like a really good football team, and this Georgia team is looking like a very good football team. That's going to be a very good game, and it's almost a playoff game for those two teams. But regardless, a two-loss Georgia team, if they dominate everybody else and things go their way, could absolutely still get into the playoffs. And if they win that game, they're almost a lock to get into the playoffs. And then we have that half a team I talked about, and that is Oklahoma. Now, Oklahoma, up until Mateer got hurt, was looking very, very good. They were looking like one of the top teams in the SEC. But then Mateer against Texas, he comes back, doesn't look fully healthy. And that puts a big question mark on Oklahoma for me. Was it just a game that Mateer wasn't fully healthy but tried to push through, or are there cracks on this Oklahoma team that we didn't see before? We will absolutely find that out. They have a very tough schedule. They have to host Ole Miss, then go at Tennessee, and then go at Alabama. I don't see, with a healthy Mateer, Oklahoma winning all three of those games. And if Mateer is still hurt, if he's at 80%, they are most definitely not winning all three of those games. I think Oklahoma would have to win out and win the conference championship game to have a shot or to get into the college football playoff. I don't think they'll make it as an at-large team. Now over to the other best conference in college football in the Big Ten. And there are 4 teams that I think could realistically make it. Those being Ohio State at number 1. I mean, Ohio State has looked like a tier alone. They are in a tier by themselves in college football on a national stage. This is a very, very good defense, a very, very good offense. I don't think Ohio State will lose a game all year. I think they go to the conference championship game and they win. Whoever they play, they will beat. I think this Ohio State team is a lock to make the playoffs. And then a surprise one that I wasn't super high on until this last week when they beat Oregon was Indiana. And Indiana played very good. They have a very, very good defense going on for them over in Indiana. And Indiana, I don't think will lose a game either. I mean, they have a fairly easy schedule for the rest of the year. They have Michigan State, UCLA, who, granted, has looked a little bit different since Jerry Neuheisel has taken over as offensive coordinator. But Maryland, Penn State, Wisconsin, and Purdue, I don't think they'll lose any of those games. I think the Hoosiers will go undefeated. They do have an easier schedule this year, and I think they will be the other team in the Big Ten championship game. But even if those teams go, I think there is room for 1 or 2 teams to sneak into the college football playoffs from the Big Ten as an at-large. And first off, we have USC. Now look, USC has had one bad game. Besides that, a lot of very, very good games. They are 5-1 overall with a 3-1 conference record and just beat a good Michigan team. And not only did they beat them, but they dominated them on both sides of the ball at the line, out-physicaled them. I think that this USC team is different than previous USC teams. I think this USC team is a very explosive offense, which we are used to seeing, but they are pairing that with a good defense. Now, that defense did not look great against Illinois, and that defense has had secondary concerns all season. But that defensive line and that defensive secondary looked a lot better against Michigan just 2 weeks later than they did against Illinois. And I'm not ready to say that that Illinois game wasn't just a fluke game for the Trojans. I don't think the Trojans will win the Big Ten this year. They do have a couple of tough games, mainly in Autzen against Oregon. This Oregon team is looking really good. I don't think the Trojans will win that game as much as I would love to see it. But I do think if they win out, if they beat Notre Dame, they beat Nebraska, but they lose to Oregon and they keep it close, I think they will sneak into the college football playoffs as an at-large bid. And then speaking of Oregon, I also think they have a very good shot at making it to the college football playoffs. I mean, they had one bad game against a very good Indiana team. And yeah, it was a loss at home. And yeah, Dante Moore didn't look good, but they've looked really good in every other game. Again, I'm not ready to say that it's not a fluke game for Oregon here. And Oregon has a fairly easy schedule the rest of the way. They play Rutgers, Wisconsin, Iowa, Minnesota, USC, and Washington. That USC team, that USC game is really going to be the toughest game for the Ducks. And if they win that game, they win out. They could sneak into the conference championship game. If Indiana has 2 losses, I don't think that'll happen. I don't think Ohio State will lose a game. So while it is possible for them to make it to the Big Ten championship game, I think Oregon is looking at an at-large bid here. And then my half team from the Big Ten, it is Michigan. Now, Michigan looked really good, except for that loss to Oklahoma, which obviously was a non-conference loss, and then they didn't look very good against USC. Now, that was a game they had to travel across the country, which is just the norm for college football these days with the expanded conferences. But this Michigan team has a chance to rebound this week against Washington. If they can beat Washington, I think they might run the table. They have Michigan State, who they should beat. They have Purdue, Northwestern, Maryland, all very easy, winnable games for the Wolverines. And then they get Ohio State at the end of the year. And we've seen how that has played out time after time after time. When Ohio State has the better team, and Michigan still finds a way to beat them. I'm not saying Michigan will continue that streak, but I haven't seen enough from Ohio State and Ryan Day to say that they won't continue that streak. And if they win out, both them and Ohio State will have one conference loss, and Michigan would have the tiebreaker over Ohio State, which means they would sneak into the Big Ten championship game. And if they sneak into the Big Ten championship game, I think they sneak into the college football playoffs as a result. Now, we're keeping it big and we're going to the Big 12. Now, the Big 12 has one team that is head and shoulders above everybody else, in my opinion, and that is the Texas Tech Red Raiders. I think the Texas Tech Red Raiders will win out. They will not lose a game. They will go to the conference championship game in Dallas, and they will beat whoever they match up against. Now, for that second team, I think there are 2 or 3 options of who they could match up against who could still sneak into the college football playoffs. Now, I think the most likely of those teams is going to be Utah. Now, this Utah team does have one loss, but since that loss, they've looked a lot better. They have gotten physical. Again, they were out physical against Texas Tech, something that doesn't typically happen at Utah, but they seem to have reversed that. They beat West Virginia 48-14. They dominate Arizona State 42-10. Now, this week will be telling for the Utes. They do travel to BYU in the Holy War to take on the Cougars, and this is almost a playoff game for both of these teams. I think Utah will take this game ultimately. I like Bear Bachmeier out in BYU, but I don't think that BYU has a balanced enough offense to beat Utah. I think Utah will win this game, and if Utah wins this game, they have a good shot at getting into the conference championship game with just one loss. And if they get into the conference championship game, I think they make it to the college football playoffs. Now, that same thing can be said for BYU, who is undefeated, 6-0 on the season, 3-0 in conference play. But BYU's wins have been a lot closer than Utah's have in common opponents. They didn't beat West Virginia by as much. They went to overtime against Arizona. Now, Utah hasn't played Arizona, but I think Utah would beat them and not have to go to overtime. But again, it will come down to this game in the Holy War. If BYU can beat Utah here, then BYU has a fairly easy shot at getting into the conference championship game as well. This game is a playoff game for both the Cougars and the Utes. And if I had to pick a half team for the Big 12, I'm picking ASU, but I just don't think that they'll be able to get it done and get to the conference championship game. I don't see them finishing with less than 2 losses, and they already lost to Utah and got dominated by them. And then they take on Texas Tech this week, and I think Texas Tech will have a pretty easy win there. I think Texas Tech, like I said, is just a lot better than any other Big 12 team right now. And then talking about the last power conference out there that we haven't talked about, and that is the ACC, and I think it's fairly obvious who will make it from this conference. I think Miami is the best team in this conference by a long shot. They should not lose a game for the rest of the year. Not only have they just looked better than every ACC team, but they also have a very easy schedule, taking on Stanford, at SMU, Syracuse, North Carolina State, going on the road against Virginia Tech, and finishing on the road against Pitt. I don't see them losing any of those games. I think Miami will absolutely be in the conference championship game, and I don't think anyone can beat them. Now, for my second team, though, I do think that Georgia Tech has a shot. Georgia Tech is also undefeated on the year, and Georgia Tech has looked fairly good. Now, some of their wins don't look as impressive anymore. Look at this Clemson win. Clemson is not a good football team. When Georgia Tech beat them, everyone thought, oh man, they just beat Clemson. But we've seen now Clemson is not a good football team. But with Haynes King, I'm not ready to discount this Georgia Tech team either. They have a fairly easy schedule. They play Duke, Syracuse, North Carolina State, Boston College, and Pitt in conference. And I don't see them losing any of those games either. They've looked good. Haynes King has shown that he can throw the ball when he needs to. He does prefer to run and take off, kind of that old Tim Tebow. If it's there, you take it. And I like that. I think that that is a good style of play for the Yellow Jackets. They're not going to out-athlete you, but they will do it on the ground and beat teams that way. So I think Miami and Georgia Tech will ultimately play each other in the conference championship game. And if both teams are undefeated up to that point, I think you have to let Georgia Tech in, even if Miami beats them. The only way I see them leaving Georgia Tech out with a 1 loss on the season and it being in the conference championship game is if some other teams, other at-large contenders have 1 loss. Georgia Tech has that 1 loss, and Miami absolutely dominates Georgia Tech. I could see the committee leaving them out. And then for the group of 5 school, I think it's clear USF is easily the best group of 5 school there is right now. They are looking good. They just put up 60-something points against North Texas, who was supposed to be the second best group of 5 school this year. Make Drew Mestemaker, who had not thrown a pick all season, throw 3 interceptions. USF is just looking like the dominant Group of 5 team this year, and I don't see a way that they lose a game this year. I think they will win out. They will be the highest ranked Group of 5 school in it, and they will make the playoffs. Now, I don't know how they'll do in the playoffs. I think they maybe have one win in them, but it will really depend on who they match up against. But I want to know what you guys think. Let me know in the comments if there are any teams that I didn't talk about that you think will get in, if I left anybody off this list, or if you think any of the teams that I talked about will have more than 1 or 2 losses and not even come close to sniffing the college football playoffs. And make sure to like and subscribe. It tells the algorithm to push more college football to your feed. And if you're watching this video, you like college football, I know you want to see more of it, so hit that like, hit that subscribe button. Let's get more college football content on your feed.